"What are you doing here? A worthless black bum like you in my office. You're nothing but a ghetto failure with zero skills. Crawl back to your slum, you ignorant trash." Charles Arthur stood at the reception desk in a neat but slightly dated suit, a red folder in his hand. He wore his best tie, the navy one with small silver dots. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. It didn't matter. "I'm here for the senior architect interview," Charles said quietly. "My name is Charles." Mary didn't let him finish. She threw her head back, performing for the wealthy clients waiting in the leather chairs. "Can you believe the nerve?" Her voice carried deliberately, making sure everyone could hear. "A senior architect." She plucked his folder from his hands with 2 fingers, holding it away from her body like something contaminated. Without opening it, without even glancing at the contents, she tossed it onto the floor. Papers scattered across the expensive marble. "We serve real professionals here," Mary announced to the lobby. Her eyes swept over Charles from head to toe, lingering on his skin, his clothes, the quiet dignity in his posture. "Not people looking for handouts. Get out before I have security show you the sidewalk." The lobby fell into suffocating silence. 6 people watched. A developer in a $1,000 suit, an interior designer with diamond earrings, a contractor who'd worked with the firm for a decade. Not one of them said a word. Not one of them helped. Charles looked down at his folder on the floor. His resume, 15 years of work, 3 Ivy League degrees, a portfolio that had saved buildings from collapse, lay scattered like trash. He looked back at Mary's mocking eyes, and he chose not to move. Hit subscribe if you want to find out what happened to Charles next. Mary Linda had been hiring manager at Apex Design Group for 12 years. In that time, she'd perfected the art of saying things without saying them. Cultural fit meant the right skin color. Professional standards meant the right social class. Traditional values meant people who looked like her. She stood now near the main desk, organizing papers she didn't need to organize, making absolutely sure Charles knew he was being ignored. 2 of the firm's most important clients, Richard Chamberlain and Victoria Ashford, sat in the waiting area, watching everything. "I apologize for this disruption." Mary's voice carried across the lobby again. She turned to Richard and Victoria with an expression of practiced concern. "We've had an issue lately with people trying to take advantage of our diversity initiatives." The words hung in the air like poison. "They see we're trying to be more inclusive," she said the word like it tasted bad. "And they think that means we'll interview anyone who walks through the door." Victoria nodded knowingly. "It's the same at my firm. Last month someone showed up claiming to be a licensed contractor. Turned out he was just..." She glanced at Charles, lowered her voice to a stage whisper. "Well, you know." Richard shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Charles stood perfectly still. His folder remained on the floor where Mary had thrown it. 1 page had slid under the potted plant near the elevator. He could see the corner of it, his MIT diploma, summa cum laude, class of 2010. Mary walked over to him slowly, deliberately. She didn't get too close. She positioned herself so the clients could see her profile, could hear every word. "I'm going to ask you one more time," she said. Her voice was calm now, controlled, which somehow made it worse. "Are you sure you have an appointment here? Because I've checked our schedule 3 times, and I don't see anyone by your name." She'd paused before name, like she didn't believe that was real either. "I received an email confirmation," Charles said. His voice remained steady. "From James Michael's office, for the lead partner position." Mary actually laughed again. This one was different, quieter, more genuine in its cruelty. "The lead partner position." She turned to her audience. "Do you hear this?" A junior receptionist named Eva Rose sat at the far desk. She'd watched everything from the beginning. Her hands trembled as she typed, or pretended to type, at her computer. She wanted to say something. God, she really wanted to. But Mary had fired the last person who questioned her judgment. Right there in the lobby, in front of everyone. Made an example of her. Eva kept typing, kept her eyes on the screen. Each keystroke a small betrayal. Sir, Mary said the word like an insult. I don't know what email you think you received, but I can assure you. She stopped mid-sentence, pulling out her phone. Actually, let me call our CEO's assistant right now. We'll get this sorted out. She dialed with exaggerated precision. Put the phone on speaker. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Of course. Mary ended the call, slipped her phone into her blazer pocket. She must be in a meeting, which means you're going to have to wait. She pointed toward the hallway near the restrooms. Far from the comfortable waiting area. Far from the coffee station and the leather chairs and the view of the city. You can wait over there, she said. Don't touch anything. Don't speak to anyone. And for God's sake, don't try to go anywhere else in this building. Charles picked up his scattered papers. Slowly. No one helped him. The MIT diploma. His architecture license. Letters of recommendation from 3 of the most respected engineers in the country. A published paper on sustainable urban design that had been cited over 200 times. He gathered them all, placed them carefully back in the folder, and walked to the hallway. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor, each step heavier than the last. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. 2 metal chairs sat against the wall, the kind you'd find in a public school. Not the handcrafted leather of the main lobby. Not the mahogany and brass of the conference rooms. Charles sat down. The chair was cold through his suit pants. From where he sat, he could see into the main lobby. Could see Mary Linda returning to her desk. Could see her lean over to Eva Rose and whisper something. Both of them glanced in his direction. Eva looked away first. Shame flickered across her face, quickly buried. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Through the glass walls, Charles watched Mary greet a new arrival. Raymond Brown. Charles recognized him from industry events. They'd met twice. Raymond was competent enough, had a decent portfolio, but his qualifications were nowhere near what the lead partner position required. Mary's entire demeanor changed. She smiled. A real smile, warm and welcoming. Shook Raymond's hand with both of hers. Mr. Brown, we've been expecting you. Please have a seat in our executive waiting lounge. Can I get you a cappuccino? Espresso? We have mineral water from Italy if you'd prefer. Raymond had arrived 23 minutes after Charles. He was being served immediately. No questions. No suspicion. No demands for extra verification. Just smiles and handshakes and, "Welcome to Apex Design Group." Charles watched them disappear into the interview wing, the section of the building he'd been told not to enter. He pulled out his phone. A text from his wife. Angela. How's it going? Knock 'em dead. Baby. Charles typed back with hands that wanted to shake but didn't let themselves. Still waiting. Interview should start soon. He didn't tell her about the laughter. About the folder on the floor. About Mary's eyes when she looked at him like he was something that needed to be disposed of. Another text came through. This one from his cousin Marcus. Remember what Uncle Robert used to say? Dignity is a suit you never take off. Charles closed his eyes. Breathed. Uncle Robert had died 3 years ago. Worked construction for 42 years. Never made more than 40,000 in a single year. Sent Charles through MIT anyway. Sold his truck to help with the last semester's tuition. You're gonna do what I never could, he'd said the day Charles graduated. His hands were calloused and scarred, but they'd held Charles's diploma like it was made of gold. You're gonna walk into those buildings and show them what we're made of. Charles opened his eyes, looked down at his folder. On top was a photograph he'd tucked inside this morning. Uncle Robert standing in front of a building Charles had designed. the first mixed-use development in their old neighborhood. Affordable housing and commercial space. LEED certified. Award-winning. Uncle Robert had cried the day it opened. Charles pressed his thumb against the photograph. The way you'd press on a wound to stop the bleeding. 35 minutes now. Through the glass, he could see Victoria Ashford finishing her consultation. She walked toward the exit, her designer heels clicking against the marble. As she passed the hallway, her eyes met Charles's for just a moment. Something flickered in her expression. Discomfort, maybe. Recognition of injustice, possibly. She clutched her Hermes purse a little tighter and walked faster. The clicking of her heels faded. Each click a small betrayal. Charles pulled out his phone again. Opened his email. Read the confirmation from James Michael's office for the third time that hour. Dear Mr. Arthur, we are pleased to confirm your interview for the lead partner position at Apex Design Group. Tuesday, 2 p.m. We look forward to discussing how your innovative approach to sustainable architecture can help guide our firm's future. It was 2:47 p.m. now. 47 minutes late for an interview he was told he didn't have. Charles's folder had gotten heavier over the years. Not physically. The papers weighed the same. But emotionally, each document carried the weight of everyone who'd made it possible. He opened it now, careful not to let anything slip out again. Past the resume, past the diplomas and licenses, past the awards and publications. At the very back, protected by a plastic sleeve, was a handwritten letter. The paper was old. The ink had faded from black to gray. But Uncle Robert's handwriting was still clear. Blocky capital letters, the writing of a man who'd left school at 16 but never stopped learning. Nephew, by the time you read this I am probably gone. The doctors say 6 months, but I think it's less. Don't be sad. I lived a good life. I got to see you become something. You are going to walk into rooms where people look at you and decide you are not enough. They'll see your face before they see your work. They'll hear your voice before they hear your ideas. Dignity is a suit you never take off. Doesn't matter if they're wearing Armani and you're wearing Sears. Doesn't matter if they went to Yale and you went to community college first like I did. You carry every person who believed in you. Your mama who worked 3 jobs. Your teachers who stayed late. Me and my scarred-up hands that built buildings I could never afford to live in. We all live in you now. Don't take the suit off. Love. Uncle Robert. Charles had read this letter before every major moment in his career. Before his thesis defense. Before his first client presentation. Before the interview that led to his first major project. He read it now, sitting in a hallway near the restrooms, while the man who threw his resume on the floor interviewed someone less qualified in the executive wing. His phone buzzed. Angela again. Charles? You okay? You usually text back faster. He should tell her. He should explain what was happening. But Angela was 8 months pregnant with their first child. A daughter they were naming Roberta, after his uncle. She didn't need the stress. Not today. Interview running long. Lots of candidates. I'll call you when I'm done. He hated lying to her. But sometimes protection looked like lies. Through the glass, he could see Mary Linda laughing with Richard Chamberlain. They both glanced toward the hallway. More laughter. Charles folded Uncle Robert's letter carefully. Put it back in the sleeve. Back in the folder. The security guard, a black man in his 50s with tired eyes, stood near the entrance. Charles had noticed him watching earlier. Had seen something in the man's face. Shame, maybe, or recognition. Their eyes met now across the lobby. The guard looked away first. At 3:15 p.m., Mary Linda emerged from the interview wing with Raymond Brown. They were laughing together like old friends. We'll be in touch very soon, Mary said warmly, shaking Raymond's hand again. I have a very good feeling about this. Raymond left through the main entrance, briefcase in hand, smile on his face. Mary watched him go. Then she turned slowly toward the hallway where Charles sat. Her smile disappeared. She walked over with the careful, deliberate steps of someone who knew they were being watched. When she reached Charles, she didn't sit down, didn't come too close, just stood there, looking down at him. "You're still here," she said. "You told me to wait," Charles replied evenly. "I'm waiting." Mary's jaw tightened. "I've checked with our CEO's office again. There's no record of any scheduled interview for you. No email. No calendar entry. Nothing." Charles pulled out his phone, opened his email, held it up so she could see the confirmation. Mary barely glanced at it. "Anyone can fake an email. The sender is james.michael@apexdigengroup.com, Charles said. "Your CEO's actual email address, which you could have spoofed." Mary crossed her arms. "Or perhaps you received a phishing email and actually believed it was real. Either way, you don't have an appointment here." She let that sit for a moment. Then she shifted her weight, changed her tone to something that sounded almost concerned. "Almost. Look," she said quietly. "I'm trying to help you here. I don't know who told you to come down here or what kind of misunderstanding occurred, but you need to leave before this becomes a bigger problem." "What kind of problem?" Charles asked. Mary glanced back at the lobby, lowered her voice even more. "You've been loitering in our building for over an hour. You're making our staff uncomfortable. You're making our clients uncomfortable." "I'm sitting in a chair," Charles said, "waiting for an interview I was invited to attend." "You're intimidating people." Mary's voice hardened again. "Do you understand what I'm saying? Your presence here is creating an unsafe environment." The words landed like a punch. Intimidating. Unsafe. Charles was 5'9", slight build, sitting quietly in a chair, holding a manila folder. But he was black, and to Mary that was weapon enough. "I'm going to ask you one final time," Mary said. "Leave voluntarily, or I will call the police and report a trespasser." Eva Rose was close enough to hear everything. Her fingers had stopped moving on the keyboard. She sat frozen at her desk, eyes locked on her screen, seeing nothing. The security guard, his name tag said Jerome Davis, shifted his weight near the entrance. His hand drifted toward the radio on his belt. Victoria Ashford had returned. She'd forgotten her reading glasses, came back to retrieve them from the lobby. Now she stood near the elevator, glasses in hand, watching. She could walk over. She could say something. She could ask what was happening, why a man in a suit with a folder full of credentials was being threatened with arrest for sitting in a chair. She could be the one person, but she wasn't. She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped inside. The doors closed. Charles looked at Mary. Thought about Uncle Robert's letter. "Don't take the suit off." "I'm not leaving," he said quietly. "I have an interview at 2 p.m. with James Michael. I'm going to wait until Mr. Michael arrives, or until someone from his office confirms that the interview has been canceled." Mary's face flushed red. "Fine." She pulled out her phone, dialed a number, put it on speaker. "This is Mary Linda, hiring manager at Apex Design. I need to report a trespasser at our downtown location." The police didn't come immediately. Mary had called the non-emergency line. This wasn't urgent enough for 911, just uncomfortable enough to weaponize the system. "They'll be here in 15 to 20 minutes, she announced to the lobby. To everyone, making sure they all knew, making sure Charles knew. Then she returned to her desk and continued working as if nothing had happened. Answered emails, organized files, smiled at a new client who walked in. Business as usual. Charles remained in the hallway. His phone buzzed constantly now. "Angela." "Charles, I'm worried. Call me please." "Marcus." "You good, bro?" His daughter Roberta, who wasn't born yet, but whose name was already written in every plan he'd made for the future. The college fund he'd started. The house with good schools he'd been saving for. All of it required this job. this moment. Jerome Davis walked past the hallway 3 times in 10 minutes. Each time he slowed down. Each time his eyes met Charles's. The 3rd time he stopped. Stood there for a long moment, hand resting on his belt, where his radio and his baton hung like the weight of every compromise he'd ever made. "I'm sorry," Jerome said, so quietly Charles almost didn't hear it. "For what?" Charles asked. Jerome didn't answer, just walked away, back to his post by the door, back to the silence that had kept him employed for 11 years, back to the shame that would follow him home tonight and every night after. Eva Rose finally moved. She stood up from her desk, walked toward the break room. As she passed the hallway, she slowed down, looked at Charles. Her eyes were red, tears threatening to fall. "I want you to know," she started. "Eva," Mary's voice cracked across the lobby like a whip. "I need those files. Now." Eva jumped, looked back at Mary, then at Charles. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The same words Jerome had said. The same worthless currency. She hurried to the break room, disappeared. Charles was alone again. Richard Chamberlain finished his meeting with one of the senior partners. As he walked toward the exit, he paused near the hallway, looked at Charles for a long moment. "This isn't right," Richard said quietly. Not to Charles, to himself, to the air. But he didn't say it loud enough for Mary to hear. Didn't say it loud enough to matter. He left. The lobby thinned out as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Clients departed. Staff started packing up for the day. Soon it would be empty except for Charles, Mary, Jerome, and Eva, and the police when they arrived. Charles's phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Arthur? This is Officer Patterson with the precinct. We received a call about a trespassing incident at your location. Can you tell me what's going on?" Charles explained, calmly, clearly, the email confirmation, the scheduled interview, Mary's refusal to check with James Michael's office. Officer Patterson was quiet for a moment. Then, "Sir, I'm going to be honest with you. If the property manager is asking you to leave, legally you need to leave. Even if you believe you have an appointment, you can sort it out later. But if they want you gone, you have to go. And if I stay, then I have to come down there and enforce the trespass order. I really don't want to do that, Mr. Arthur. I really don't." Charles closed his eyes, thought about the headline. Black architect arrested at job interview. Thought about future employers Googling his name. Thought about Roberta learning about this moment someday. "I understand," Charles said. "Thank you for calling first. I'm giving you 20 minutes, Officer Patterson said. "If you're not gone by then, I have to come. I'm sorry." The call ended. Mary was watching from across the lobby. She'd heard enough to know Charles was running out of time. Her smile was small, victorious. Charles stood up, gathered his folder, looked at Uncle Robert's photograph one more time. Don't take the suit off. But sometimes the suit wasn't enough. Sometimes the world demanded you strip it anyway. Charles walked toward the exit slowly. Each step a small death of the dream he'd carried into this building 93 minutes ago. Mary Linda watched him go, arms crossed, expression satisfied. Jerome Davis held the door open, wouldn't meet Charles's eyes. Eva Rose stood near her desk, tears finally falling, silent and useless. Charles stepped outside. The afternoon had turned cold. Gray clouds gathered overhead, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet but would soon. The sidewalk was mostly empty. Rush hour hadn't started. He stood there, folder clutched against his chest, and pulled out his phone. 17 missed calls from Angela, 8 texts from Marcus, 3 from his mentor at MIT, Professor Chun, who'd written him one of the recommendation letters currently sitting in the folder that Mary Linda had never read. Charles couldn't call any of them back. Not yet. Not while his voice still threatened to break. His phone vibrated again. Another text from Angela. Baby, please. You're scaring me. He started to type. Stopped. Started again. His hands were shaking now. The tremor he'd been suppressing for 93 minutes finally breaking through. Behind him, through the glass doors, he could see Mary Linda laughing with Eva. Probably talking about him. Probably making jokes. The folder in his hands felt impossibly heavy. 15 years of work. 3 degrees. A portfolio that had won awards. Letters of recommendation from people who'd vouched for him, put their own reputations on the line to say, this man is exceptional. None of it had mattered. Not to Mary. Not to the clients who'd watched. Not to Eva or Jerome or Victoria or anyone else who'd had the power to speak up and chose silence instead. Charles found a bench near the building entrance. Sat down. Finally opened the email from James Michael's office. Read it again, looking for something he'd missed. Some clue that would make this make sense. There was nothing. It was real. The interview was real. The invitation was real. He'd just been denied anyway. Rain started to fall. Light at first. Then heavier. Charles didn't move. Let it soak into his suit jacket. Let it blur the ink on his resume. He thought about calling Uncle Robert. About how Uncle Robert would know exactly what to say. Would know how to turn this moment into a lesson, into fuel, into something other than humiliation. But Uncle Robert was 3 years in the ground. And Charles was alone on a cold bench in the rain, holding a folder full of credentials that hadn't been enough to get him through a glass door. His phone buzzed. He almost didn't look. But he did. A text from an unknown number. Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Jam. Charles stared at the screen. Jam. James Michael. Before he could process it, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. A man in his 60s stepped out. Silver hair. Expensive suit. The kind of presence that changed the temperature of a room just by entering it. James Michael. He looked at Charles sitting on the bench in the rain, folder clutched to his chest. Then he looked through the glass doors at Mary Linda, who had just noticed the CEO's car and whose face had gone white. James Michael's expression didn't change. He simply walked toward the building. But he stopped at the bench first. Extended his hand to Charles. Mr. Arthur, he said, I am so deeply sorry for what just happened to you. Would you please come inside with me? The lobby fell silent when James Michael entered. Not the suffocating silence of before. This was different. This was the silence of power entering a room and everyone else realizing exactly how small they were. Mary Linda rushed forward. Smile plastered on her face. Mr. Michael, what a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting. James held up one hand. Mary stopped mid-sentence. Is there somewhere private we can speak? James asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. Of course. My office is. I meant with Mr. Arthur, James said. I need somewhere to speak privately with the candidate for our lead partner position. The color drained from Mary's face completely now. Charles stood in the lobby, water still dripping from his suit, folder in hand. James Michael gestured toward the executive conference room, the one with the glass walls and the view of the city. As they walked, Charles could feel every eye in the lobby tracking him. Eva Rose had stopped crying, just stared. Jerome Davis had his hand over his mouth. Mary Linda stood frozen near the reception desk, her brain trying to process what was happening and failing. James closed the conference room door, pressed a button that turned the glass opaque. Sit, please, he said. Charles sat. James sat across from him, took a breath. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. My assistant scheduled your interview for 2 p.m. I was stuck in traffic. Accident on the bridge. I'm 45 minutes late. I texted her to call down and let you know I was delayed. He paused. She did call. She spoke with Mary Linda directly. Told her to please make you comfortable and that I would be there as soon as possible. The words hung in the air. Mary told her there was no one here by that name, that no interview was scheduled. My assistant assumed there had been a miscommunication and made a note for me to follow up later. James's jaw tightened. Then, 15 minutes ago, I got a call from Eva Rose, your receptionist. She called my personal cell phone, which took considerable courage given that doing so could cost her her job. She told me what was actually happening here. Charles's throat was too tight to speak. James stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. My firm was built on a principle, he said quietly. Excellence over everything. I don't care what you look like, where you're from, who you know. I care what you can build. He turned back to Charles. I've been reading your work for 2 years, Mr. Arthur. Your paper on sustainable load-bearing systems in mixed-use developments changed how I think about architecture. Your design for the Riverside Commons project, the one that saved a struggling neighborhood from displacement, that's the future I want to build. He walked back to the table, picked up Charles's folder, still damp from the rain. I didn't invite you here for an interview, James said. I invited you here to offer you a partnership, to ask you to help lead this firm into the next decade. He opened the folder, looked at the scattered, rain-damaged pages. But first, we need to address what happened to you today. James Michael walked out of the conference room first. Charles followed. The lobby had filled up again. Word had spread that something was happening. Staff members who'd left for the day had come back. Senior partners had emerged from their offices. Everyone wanted to see what came next. Mary Linda stood near her desk, hands clasped in front of her, professional mask back in place. But her hands were shaking. Mary, James said, not loud. He didn't need to be loud. Could you come here, please? She walked over. Each step measured, calculated. She was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to explain, how to survive. James held up Charles's folder. This resume was on the floor when I arrived, he said. According to Mr. Arthur, you threw it there without reading it. Is that accurate? Every eye in the lobby turned to Mary. There was a misunderstanding, she began. The gentleman didn't have proper. Is it accurate? James repeated. Did you throw his resume on the floor without reading it? Mary's mouth opened, closed. Yes, but... Read it now, James said. He handed her the folder. Out loud. Start with the education section. Mary's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Found the resume. The ink had run slightly from the rain, but the words were still clear. Education, she read. Her voice was barely a whisper. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Master of Architecture, summa cum laude, 2010. Bachelor of Science in Structural Engineering, magna cum laude, 2008. She stopped. Keep going, James said. Princeton University. Undergraduate coursework. Dean's List, 2004 to 2006. The awards section, James interrupted. Mary's hands were shaking so badly now she could barely hold the page. American Institute of Architects Young Architect of the Year, 2015. National Council of Structural Engineers Associations, Innovation Award, 2017. Sustainable Buildings Council, Excellence in Green Design. Her voice broke. The lobby was absolutely silent. Richard Chamberlain had returned. He stood near the entrance, face pale, listening to every word. Victoria Ashford stood next to him. The project portfolio section, James said. His voice remained calm, terrifyingly calm. Mary read. Each project a blow. Each achievement a condemnation. The Riverside Commons development. The hospital that had won 3 national awards. The university library that had been featured in Architectural Digest. The mixed-use complex that had been studied in engineering programs across the country. When she finished, James took the resume back. This man, he said, gesturing to Charles. designed the sustainable retrofit for the Morrison building. The project that saved our firm from bankruptcy 18 months ago. The project that won us 6 new clients and restored our reputation after the Wellington disaster. He let that sink in. The Morrison project that none of you could figure out how to make economically viable. The project you all said was impossible. Charles Arthur designed that, anonymously through a consulting contract because I needed the best mind I could find and I didn't want egos getting in the way. Mary Linda's face had gone from white to gray. He saved this firm, James continued. And today, when he arrived for an interview to become my partner, you threw his resume on the floor and called the police. James turned to address the entire lobby now. How many of you saw what happened to Mr. Arthur today? Slowly, hands went up. Eva Rose, Jerome Davis, Richard Chamberlain, Victoria Ashford, 6 others. How many of you said something? The hands went down. All of them except one. Eva Rose kept her hand up, tears streaming down her face. I called Mr. Michael, she said. I should have done it sooner. I should have. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. James nodded to her, then turned back to Mary. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You'll receive information about your final paycheck and benefits in the mail. Mary opened her mouth to protest, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, James said. That's worse. Jerome Davis stepped forward. He was crying now too. This man in his 50s with tired eyes and 11 years of silence. I should have said something, Jerome said. I saw everything and I said nothing and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He looked at Charles. I've got 2 kids in college and I was scared. But that's not an excuse. That's nothing. He took off his security badge, held it out to James. You should fire me too, Jerome said. I don't deserve to work here. James looked at the badge. Jerome. Charles. Mr. Arthur, James said quietly. What do you think? Charles looked at Jerome for a long moment, thought about Uncle Robert, about the construction sites where his uncle had worked alongside men who'd made the same choice Jerome had today. Silence over solidarity, survival over standing up. Keep your job, Charles said finally. But remember this feeling. Remember what silence costs. Jerome nodded, couldn't speak, just held his badge against his chest like a second chance he didn't deserve, but would spend the rest of his career trying to earn. James turned to the assembled staff. We're going to have mandatory anti-bias training, he said. Every single person in this firm, partners included. And we're going to examine our hiring practices, our interview processes, every system that allowed today to happen. He gestured to Charles. Mr. Arthur has agreed to join us as lead partner, effective immediately. He will have full authority over our design division and will report directly to me. If anyone has a problem with that, you can join Mary in clearing out your desk. No one moved. Mary Linda was escorted out by Jerome. She didn't look at anyone, just clutched her designer bag and walked through the same glass doors where she'd laughed at Charles 90 minutes earlier. The lobby began to clear. Staff returned to work or went home. The show was over. Eva Rose approached Charles carefully. Mr. Arthur, she said, I know my apology doesn't fix anything, but I am so sorry. I should have called Mr. Michael the moment you arrived. I should have said something when she threw your folder. I should have. You called, Charles said simply. When it mattered most, you called. Thank you. Eva broke down completely. Charles handed her a tissue from the reception desk. I'd like you to be my executive assistant, he said. If you're interested. Eva stared at him. After what I did? After what you finally did, Charles corrected. Growth matters more than perfection. That evening, Charles sat in James Michael's office. The rain had stopped. The city lights sparkled below. I need to ask you something, James said. Why didn't you leave? Most people would have walked out after the first insult. Certainly after the police were called. Charles thought about Uncle Robert's letter. About dignity being a suit you never take off. Because I belong there, he said simply. I had the credentials. I had the invitation. I had the right to be there. And the moment I accepted that I didn't, the moment I let someone else's prejudice define my worth, that's when I actually lose. James nodded slowly. This job is going to be hard, he said. Not the architecture part, you can do that in your sleep. But walking into rooms where you're the first, where you're the only, where people look at you the way Mary looked at you today. I know, Charles said. And you still want it? Charles thought about Roberta, about the world she'd be born into in 4 weeks, about whether that world would be different because of what he built today. I still want it, he said. Epilogue. 6 months later, Charles Arthur stood in front of the firm's entire staff, presenting the design for a new affordable housing complex in the neighborhood where Uncle Robert had lived. Eva Rose sat in the front row taking notes. Jerome Davis stood by the door, wearing a different badge now, head of equity and inclusion security, a position Charles had created for him. Richard Chamberlain and Victoria Ashford sat in the audience. They'd both written letters to James Michael after that day. Letters explaining their silence, their complicity, their shame. Both had donated to a scholarship fund Charles had established in Uncle Robert's name. It didn't erase what they didn't do, but it was something. And Charles spoke about load-bearing walls and sustainable materials and the mathematics of hope. His daughter Roberta was at home with Angela, for months old now, sleeping in a crib that Charles had designed himself. She would grow up knowing this story, would know what her father endured and why he endured it and what he built from the ruins of that day. And maybe, she would walk through glass doors and never have to worry about someone throwing her resume on the floor. Maybe she would live in the world her father was building right now, one dignified choice at a time. Maybe. But if not, at least she'd know the suit never comes off. What happened at Apex Design Group wasn't about one prejudiced hiring manager. It was about the dozen people who saw injustice and said nothing. About the systems that protect comfort over dignity. About the ordinary moments when we choose silence over solidarity and tell ourselves it doesn't matter. It always matters. The question is, which person in this story would you have been?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. I'll see you in the next one.